Carson later told the New York Times he didn't remember all the specific details, saying it was informal, adding the general told him something like, "With a record like yours, we could easily get you a scholarship to West Point." The Wall Street Journal also reports that in an interview, Carson claimed he was a high school student. He protected white students during that time in his biology lab by hiding them amid violence after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. But the paper says a half a dozen former classmates from his Detroit class could not corroborate the story. The Journal also calls into question a story from Carson's book where he claims during a course at Yale entitled Perceptions 301, the professor told the students their final exams had accidentally burned and they would all have to retake it. As Carson tells it, the whole class left in protest, and then, quote, "The professor came toward me. With her was a photographer for the Yale Daily News who paused and snapped my picture. A hoax," the teacher said. "We wanted to see who was the most honest student in the class." Carson said the professor even gave him $10. But the Journal reports there's no photo of him that ever ran, and there was no class at the university that had that title or number when he was there. Carson responded on Facebook yesterday saying, "Allow me also to do the research for the Wall Street Journal reporter. Here is a syllabus for the class you claim never existed. Still waiting on an apology." Also being called into question is Carson's account that he was once threatened at gunpoint at a fast food restaurant. The Washington Post writes, in an account given earlier this year, Carson claimed to have once been threatened by an armed robber while eating at a Popeyes restaurant in Baltimore. However, critics noted that Carson is a vegetarian.
They make great salads.
And Baltimore police said they have no record of the robbery. Let's bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Chris Jansing, who's been covering this story. Chris, can you add any context here? Because he is definitely blaming the media for getting it wrong.
Oh, yes. And I think that there are two levels, right, that we have to look at. One level is, for example, when did he meet General Westmoreland? If he got the date wrong, is that something people wouldn't vote for him as a result of? The question is, what about these different stories that people are investigating go to his life story? Because it's his life story that made him a best-selling author, that made him in demand on the speaking circuit, and that he has parlayed remarkably into a front-runner status in the presidential race. So if you go back, for example, to what you showed that over the weekend, his campaign posted a syllabus from Yale saying, look, this class does exist in spite of the fact the Wall Street Journal says it didn't. But if you click out on it and you actually read it, the page that they put up of the syllabus is from 2002. So I called the campaign and I said, well, how does it prove that there was this class if the syllabus itself said 2002? And they said, well, this class has pretty much been there, as I understand it, for a long, long time. I don't think the name of the class is really the question here. If he got the name of the class wrong, people are not going to say, I'm not going to vote for him. The question is the story that goes to who he is as a person. And if you look at the polls, people most like his honesty. The question really is, was he named the most honest person in the class? The question is, was he the person who shielded his classmates in high school after the riots following the MLK assassination? I think the real details here are the very difficult ones because no one has come forward to say, yes, I was in that class and that's what happened.
Well, as the Wall Street Journal said, and notice we keep talking about the Wall Street Journal, the conservative newspaper of record. It's the Wall Street Journal who actually writes an editorial, Ben Carson's risen in presidential polls in part by his inspiring biography. So it's no surprise his opponents and the press corps are looking for ways to blot the ledger. So Mark Halperin, you have told me day in and day out that the reason why Ben Carson is doing as well as Ben Carson is doing is because, well, because of his biography. Right here, guys, you can take that down. Nobody's reading it. Thank you. So we have the stabbing of a friend, which turns out to be not Bob. We've got the hammer to the mother's head. We're not really sure about that. We've got the most honest person in class, which sounds iffy. We've got him shielding people in Detroit riots, locking white people up in biology labs to shield them. Everybody goes, well, I can't remember that either. We've got a Westmoreland dinner that nobody can remember, that he did the wrong date on, and they actually went back and looked at it. We've got this Popeyes thing, which, again, I never really understood how that cut for him. Saying that a guy sticks a gun in his stomach and he points, you really want to shoot that guy. It's kind of like the mother on the head. This is hitting the mother with a hammer. So how does all of this play in, especially when he talks about media bias? And I talked about media bias last week. I know media bias. This is not media bias. This is just one question after another. It looks like the thread is being pulled and everything's unraveling. What's the impact?
In the short term, I think it will help him raise money and rally his supporters. In the medium term, I think he has to worry that one of these stories actually proves false and
what if he just proves one of them true? I mean, he can't. There is no corroboration on the stabbing of a friend. He had to back down on that. The Westmoreland dinner, he had to back down on that. The scholarship, Willie. Let's talk about the scholarship for a second. I played football in high school. I had a guy from University of Miami come up to me, and he said, "You know, you're good. This is my junior year. We're going to be looking at you next year."
Miami,
nice. Yeah. Also, Florida State. Got a letter from Florida State. Now, what if I had gone around for 20 years, and I'm dead serious, and said, you know, I could have pursued a football career at the two best colleges in college football, but you know, I decided to pursue my studies instead. That would be the same thing. Like, to get to West Point, it's not even filling out an application. When I was congressman, I had an entire committee that sifted through all the applications, and it was a long, arduous process. Somebody didn't just tap you on the shoulder and say you're going there. Like, it's just, the whole thing is very insulting.
Yeah, well, you have to get an appointment, obviously, to go to West Point. I think all these little stories put together do represent some problem in his ability to tell the truth if they turn out to be false. But what I will say is it doesn't change the core of his life story, which is what people are really drawn to with Ben Carson, that he grew up in poverty, that he grew up with a single mother, that he rose to become this preeminent physician and pediatric neurosurgeon. That's the part of his story I think people love, and it's allowed him to come out and say, he said explicitly to Chris, this is us versus them with the media. And the more he says that and the more Donald Trump says that, the more support he gets from his loyal supporters. So it's a strange place we're in the middle of right now, where candidates can say things that may not be true, be pressed on them by the press, and then turn to their supporters and say, see, here they go again.
These are bald-faced lies at this point, and the fact that the media is cowering after being accused of media bias is pathetic. And like, once again, you've got Donald Trump wielding the truth weapon.
So let the two Republicans come out and say it. And again, for everybody that was offended in this industry when I said what I said about media bias last week, this is the plus side of it. I can call BS on other Republicans when they call out media bias like this. Nicole, this is not media bias.
This is a guy running
BS,
on literally...
And it's one lie after another lie after another lie, and he keeps getting caught. And by the way, I've got to say, the media bias has run for Ben Carson up to this point because nobody has said, hey, wait a second, he doesn't have a clue about policy issues, which is what the Wall Street Journal finally said today.
The story to me...
He doesn't know anything about policy. In his biography, he's lying, and the press has been cowering for months.
I'm still kicking over the pyramids.
The pyramids.
But let me just say, the story to me is that the media is somehow uncomfortable saying the guy lied about everything in his biography, and all he's got is his biography, and by the way, the pyramids.
What do you consider the lies to be?
Well, the whole biography is coming apart. And listen,
what are the lies?
Well, all the details seem to be slightly off.
Some facts on which they've acknowledged.
Details of my biography were slightly off. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't even have this.
Mark.
And I searched you. I barely know how to use the Twitter, but I searched you last night to see what you had said, and I was astounded that you were
sort of convinced that all of the threads of the Politico story had come apart. Everyone's biography is going to be pulled apart, but if you have a record, if you've been a governor, if you've been a, if you've served in office,
and by the way, Nicole, if I have made millions of dollars by going around and saying, as he said to Charlie Rose, I got a scholarship to West Point, and I could have gone to West Point, but I chose instead to pursue. I mean, this biography is all he has, Mark. It's all he has. He's feasted off of it.
Look at his life story.
He's feasted off of it. There have been movies made about it. He's made millions of dollars on it, and he can't corroborate any of these stories. Now, I guarantee you, Joe Biden said he got a scholarship. We want to talk about media bias. 1988, he said he was given an academic scholarship, I think, to Syracuse in the 88 campaign for law school, was one of the best students. He was run out of the political race for that, called a liar, called a plagiarist, all of these other things. And Ben Carson, I mean, what are you now doing defense for Ben Carson? It's one story after another.
With all due respect, do you have an interview lined up today?
Some of the things he was imprecise about, but some of the things he's been asked to prove a negative, and I don't think we should lump them all in together.
Okay, Chris Jensing asked him about the vetting process. I do want to see that. Can we toss to that fight? We'll see Chris on the other end. Roll it.
It shows his complete and total ignorance of American political history to say there's never been vetting like this. You look at Hillary Clinton, and by the way, she deserves everything she's gotten from this table.
But she's been
we have
completely
raked
over the
coals.
And she
nonstop, day in and day out and day in. We've done it here, searching for the truth. All right? You look at George W. Bush, the National Guard story. They went after Bush there. Joe Biden, again, like I said before, when he ran in '88. Look at Bill Clinton. John Meacham, Bill Clinton back in 1992, we heard that he'd visited the USSR. That was something that was swirling around forever. Barack Obama. Barack Obama didn't get it with Jeremiah Wright. How many times did we talk, and how many times did the national media talk about him saying, God damn the United States of America the day after or the Sunday after 9/11? I mean, we all know that. We all heard about Bill Ayers. We all heard about everything with Barack Obama. Ben Carson has been given cotton candy and treated to lollipops by the mainstream media.
Yep.
I've never seen a candidate treated as gently as Ben Carson has been treated. You can't even say it about Donald Trump, who's been raked over the coals and predicted that he was going to get kicked out of the race every Sunday.
Mocked, ridiculed, and cast aside as a joke.
I'm sorry. Put some historical perspective on this, John Meacham. At least in the last 50 years, how presidential candidates have gone through much worse than Ben Carson having one or two bad articles written about him.
Well, let's not do 50. Let's go back about 200. Thomas Jefferson had the entire Sally Hemings story published while he was in the White House. Andrew Jackson thought that his wife had died because John Quincy Adams' campaign had been so negative about when they were divorced. Abraham Lincoln was attacked in the most vicious kinds of terms. Franklin Roosevelt was attacked in the most vicious terms. So this is part of the political process, is you do end up facing questions of every kind. I remember talking to Lamar Alexander, Tennessee senator, but when he was running in '96, and you were talking this a second ago as well, he self-vetted, as he once put it, so that when I get up on the left side of the bed and you ask me what I had for breakfast on August 2nd, 1974, I'd be able to tell you. So this is part of the game. I don't think it's a particularly productive part of the game necessarily, but if you're running on your biography, you better fact-check the biography.
And Willie, some of these are just, again, I'm sorry, I can remember where I was 18 years old or 17 years old when people said, hey, maybe you can play football at Miami or FSU. I remember where I was when I was 20 years old when other things. I said, oh, this was so long ago. If I'm in Popeyes and a guy sticks a gun in my gut, I'm going to remember that. If there are riots and I'm saying I'm shielding white kids, I'm going to remember that. These are all stories that show what a great man he is. And him saying, oh, I don't remember, it was 50 years ago, it's nonsense.
In this bizarro political world, though, the point I was trying to make is that Republican voters are more distrustful of the media than they are of their own candidates. So they leap to their defense, which is what's happened with Ben Carson. His fundraising has gone up. So I don't think these are good things for him when you put them together. But in the short term, anyway, it's not hurting him. In fact, it's allowing him to say, the media is coming at me again.
So Nicole, there's media bias and there's lying. What's going on here?
Look, I agree with you. He's not an old man. Like, I don't know what he forgets about. And most men and women sort of remember that transition from childhood to manhood. The reason he wrote about these things in his book is because these were the formative experiences of his life. So the fact that it's not one thing he doesn't remember, it's 5. I think it's ridiculous.
And they're really pivotal moments.
And nobody can corroborate
any of them. These aren't the same people being asked to corroborate all 4 stories. These are different people whose lives were touched and who touched his life. I also, while I agree with you that in the near term his supporters will rally to his defense, his supporters aren't necessarily, they don't make up all of the Republican primary voters. And I think there are a lot of people who are at the acceptance level of our 10 stages of, oh my God, what's happened to our party with certain candidates, but they will not get there with Carson based on this. I think there are a lot of Republicans who watch Donald Trump evolve. We talked last week. He gets better every week at all of the sort of basic skills of running for president, the debates, the interviews, media management. Ben Carson is not on that trajectory. So I think this will give a lot of people
He's not getting
pause.
better. And by the way, Herman Cain accused media bias of taking him down. Michelle Bachmann did the same. We've seen this story before. I say crazy never wins. Right? I said crazy never wins. I wrote an op-ed about this last year. And we, at the end of the day, vet ourselves out pretty well. Chris Jansen.
He raised $3.5 million off of this last week. If you go to his Facebook page, which is a big part of his fundraising and a big part of his very strong base, the people who believe him and who think that the media is out to get him, and you read the comments, the unanimity of opinion against the media is strong. Compare that $3.5 million. I think he raised $1 million the week before. But the question is, as Nicole rightly raises, he's got his base. They're behind him. How does he broaden it? What's the impact of all of these revelations on that?
That's incredible. Chris Jansen, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Great reporting. Let's be very clear. Ben Carson has been caught not telling the truth. And when your biography is at the center of your campaign, that is a devastating, devastating problem. And he doesn't even know policies, the Wall Street Journal said this morning in the editorial. That kind of makes it even worse. What's coming up next?
Well, it's a shame, I'll just add, that there's all this, I think, real kind of natural discussion about media bias, which could be healthy for the process, but people like that use it as a shield, take advantage of it, and then make it kind of a cartoon.
And I want to say one more time to wrap this up.
Sorry.
So guess what?
No offense to a guy who
guess what?
Really
all of you guys that want to write your blogs saying that this is part of media bias, go back and see what I said a week ago and see what you were writing about me a week ago, having the guts to tell the truth. Guess what? I have the guts to tell the truth to the people I work for. And I also have the guts to tell the truth about candidates when they're lying. Last Monday, I told the truth to the media. This morning, I'm telling the truth to Ben Carson. You're lying, and you need to come out front, and you need to admit it, because it's only going to get worse from here.
Still ahead on Morning Joe, debate politics. We'll talk to